Access to medical care is becoming more and more of an issue here in Guam, and it doesn't even matter if you have the ability to pay. It's getting harder to see a doctor, to get an appointment, or to get the specialty care that you need. So I want to show you a growing solution to a growing problem. They're going to go out of their way to help find you a solution. And they've been growing their clinical services. Aside from this place looking and feeling homely, like this is their waiting area. Like, I don't think that people really understand that they do full clinical services here. Like, this is one of their clinical rooms. Look how nice it is. You get your vision exam here. So do you need to see an OBGYN, get family medicine done, internal medicine done? This is all stuff that's done here at the Total Guam Foundation. And just to tell you again, this place is not for profit. This is the psychologist's office. Yes, they have a psychology department. They also do psychiatry. It's an entire mental health department that they have here on top of all the other clinical services that they provide. If you need medical care, if you're having problems getting a doctor, getting an appointment, call the Todu Guam Foundation at 649-TODU or 649-8638. You can visit them on the first. Good morning. How is everyone's morning going? It is 8:06 a.m. on Thursday, May 7, 2026. My name is Troy Torres. I had a topsy-turvy. My morning was a mix of thoughts and emotions as I was preparing for this show. So I wake up relatively early, probably not as early as some of you. And, you know, I get my coffee going, I do my thing, and then I start to, I have my notes from the night before about what I'm going to talk about in the morning, and then sometimes it changes based on what I see in the other news outlets. And I don't really take a deep dive into it. I look at the headlines and I'm like, okay, is this something that we did? Is this something new? If it's something new, is it something interesting? And I saw an editorial in the PDN. And I read the editorial. It was very short. And I started to get very upset. And I got very upset because the very first thought in my head was, what happened to you, PDN? And then the second thought in my head was, where have you been this whole time, PDN? And I want to talk about that editorial. It has to do with the legislative investigation, or the proposed legislative investigation into alleged corruption and mishandling of funds by the Tenorio administration. I want to talk about that first this morning. Then I saw, there's a couple of issues that I had on my notes from last night that I'm going to actually move to. One of them will be tonight on the Troy Torres Show, and that's on the governor's vision for a hospital, and the one of the court cases involved in that. I want to talk about that tonight. I was going to talk about it this morning, but that got pushed off because I saw a story in the Mariana's Press, and it was very interesting. Not the story itself, but who's involved, and just the similarities, the parallels to a Guam case. Now, Mariana's Press is a CNMI-based media station, independent journalism. Tomas Mangloni, I think it might have been his story. He wrote about a federal court case involving the siphoning of federal funds. There was a mother and daughter who were defendants in the case, and they were sentenced. And the judge gave a harsh sentence. The judge rejected appeals for leniency in the case, in the sentencing. And that judge is the same federal judge in the Tenorio corruption case here in Guam, Judge Ramona Mangloni. We're going to talk about that. And then what was at the top of my list going into bed last night and has made it into this morning's lineup is doctor versus doctor. There was a public hearing that happened on a bill that would amend a current law that allows foreign doctors, that makes better pathways for foreign doctors who meet certain qualifications to practice in Guam. That led to a very interesting back and forth between Dr. Tom Shieh and Dr. Nate Berg, and it also involved Senator Telos Hadegui, who is the author of the original law. We're going to talk about all of these things. And on the other side of this commercial break, what we're going to start with is this idea that if the media was doing its job, then the legislative proposed investigation wouldn't be as necessary as it is today. We'll talk about these things on the other side of the break. And we might get Senator Tony Atta on the line at the tail end of that first discussion. Stick with us.
Good Morning Show with Troy Torres is brought to you by 76 Circle K Guam.
I think objectively, reasonable people can surmise that over the past 8 years, the media in Guam has been asleep at the wheel for some of the more major developments in Guam. And I have a theory that part of that has to do with, because if you talk to the older reporters, right, they're like, oh, the reporters these days are not like us. You know, they're so spoiled with their access to the internet. We had to go to the libraries. We had to go out into the field. We had to go and get the story, and that gave us our drive. So I don't doubt that that's part of it. But I think another part of it was the pandemic. And in the pandemic, the trust but verify took on a whole new monstrous identity. And trust was something that was, to a large extent, necessary because of the limitations and because of the need. You know, you balance this pursuit of the truth against the need to do no harm in your journalistic responsibilities. And so, you know, the need to do no harm, I think, in my theory, would always outweigh, especially in a pandemic, and because of how things go in a pandemic, how the government is in charge, a lot of times things went unquestioned. And I think that because that was the case for an extended period, first there was the lockdowns, which was an extended period. Then there was the slow letting off of those lockdown conditions. It was an extended period that I think changed the way journalism works in Guam, and, you know, arguably in other places as well, but particularly in Guam, to the point where all of the things that were happening during the pandemic, and for which audits are now coming out to say, yeah, this is what was happening was wrong, or reports coming out by independent sources as well, right? That, you know, this was not done right. This should have been scrutinized, but the media didn't do its job. And whether that was because the media couldn't do its job or the media was remiss in its responsibilities, we didn't do our jobs during the pandemic. And then that followed. Because, I mean, if you were in the chat rooms that I'm in, where, you know, the government has us, the different agencies, they like the governor's office, Guam Police Department, Guam Fire Department, National Guard, all these different agencies, right? I'm sure Kandit's not in some of these, right? But we're not invited to some of this stuff. But if you look at the discourse that happens, at least in these chats, you see a very different media environment than when I was over in Adelup. When I was the communications director, the reporters were very aggressive, very persistent, some not respectful. And the attitude was, at least for us in the government, at least during my time in the government, number one, you never pick a fight with people who buy ink by the barrel. There's that saying, right? So that was number one. Secondly, we were afraid of the media. We were afraid to be on the bad side of even reporters, not to mention editors and, of course, publishers, right? And then, of course, there was this issue, and how I wanted to be proactive about it back in my day was, we're not going to fight with the media. Matter of fact, we're going to be friends with them. We're going to do their jobs. We're not going to require them to hunt down the things that they need. When they ask us for something, we're going to provide it as instantaneously as we can. They're never going to have to write a FOIA. If anybody writes a FOIA to any agency who is not a lawyer or a member of, or someone who's asking for like just volumes and volumes of stuff, then that agency head is going to get in trouble for having our, or violating our transparency policy to the point where someone felt the need to write a FOIA. It's unacceptable. And we are going to hunt down the data, the information that's all over this government, because this government isn't able to house the data efficiently as it's supposed to. And even if the reporter's not asking for these things, if we can surmise that it's part of their story, if it's something that's related, we're going to provide it to the media. And that's what we did. That's how we cultivated our relationship with the newsrooms. And they still distrusted us, and we understood that was their job. That environment no longer exists, I'll tell you that. This administration has had almost no respect for its promises of transparency. This administration has conducted itself with absolute impunity for the white hot light of public scrutiny, understanding that that white hot light is cold and it's dim. It no longer is a white hot light. And that has bred over the years this absolute arrogance about their ability to do things because no one's going to hold them accountable. And over the last 8 years, hardly anyone has held them accountable. And the system of accountability is such that it's not enough that there's a public auditor putting out audit reports. And it's not enough that there's an office of the Attorney General that has a government corruption division. The only entity that has ever placed fear into the hearts of local officials, local corrupt officials, has been the FBI and the U.S. Attorney, the federal government. But their prosecutions of corruption are far and few between. We're lucky to have gotten the Tenorio corruption case. But what about everything else that we have known as a community and been gaslit about over the past decade has existed and for which the federal government has not delved into a corruption case? But nobody else in the local government is doing anything. And sometimes I like go off into these tangents and I lose my frame of thought. Sorry, it's a bad habit of mine. Plus, I'm looking at myself in the screen. I'm like, turn this way so that the better side is so that you look skinnier, Troy. Sorry, I apologize as I'm trying to remember what it is I was about to say. I'm so stupid. Anyway, so you have the media remiss in its responsibilities. You have the growing power of the administration or the government, right? And I remember there was a time, and accountability being something that is slipping from our memories of what that looks like more and more as each day goes by. And you have these different entities that have a role in it. And these entities, they're not supposed to work together, but there's supposed to be a synergy in order for true accountability to exist, to be at the grasp of the people, and especially at the grasp of the voters in an election year. And this time, months before an election, is especially important in that quest for accountability, because the louder you get during a time like this, the more likely it is that voters will be able to be informed and to make the right decisions at the polls. And it's not enough that there's just a public auditor doing his thing and that he's been doing his job. He's like the only one over the last 8 years who's been coming to work and doing his job, even way more than the media has been doing its job. You're supposed to have government corruption investigators over the office of the Attorney General. You didn't really see much effort in the previous AG administration. But to be fair, You're not seeing any efficient effort in this current AG administration either. And I don't know where the other AG candidates in this election stand when it comes to government corruption. You have one AG candidate who is very close with and is involved in the campaign to continue this administration into a third term through the Josh and Tina campaign. You have another candidate who is just, he's the anti-Doug candidate. You have another candidate who's very popular, but I don't know what he stands for. And then you have another candidate who was a part of the current administration, but I don't know where he stands on this issue of we need to do something about corruption, right? And so there's that side of the accountability quest house that is just, it's absent, right? There's the OPA doing his job and his team doing their job, doing it very well, producing the reports, producing the foundation for this accountability quest that everyone else in this system is supposed to be taking and running with, right? You have the media not doing its job for the past 8 years, would rather cover proclamation signings, let's get a comment or two from the governor or the lieutenant governor or the senators. Let's cover this frou-frou thing or that frou-frou thing. Or when a scandal comes up, gives it coverage for one day, for one news cycle, and then it's over with. There's no follow-up. Or covers court cases and criminal indictments and magistrates reports because that's what fuels the click. That's the clickbait for everybody. That's what everybody wants to read. That's what everybody wants to look at. And at the end of the day, there's no follow through in what happens to those people who are accused of crimes. And, then they're, and we were guilty of this too. We were publishing those magistrates reports. And then at a certain point, I was like, let's stop doing that, because if we're not going to follow through with it, all we're doing is destroying the lives of these people and their families. And all they're being is accused of something. They haven't been convicted of anything. So if we're not going to have the resources to follow through with each of these cases, we're not going to do this unless it's like a murder or something like that. And so there's the media not doing its job because it's busy doing other stuff. And then there's the legislature. And there was a time, I remember, when you could count on the legislature to be that voice for the people that fought back against the encroaching power of the government. And it was not too long ago that the legislature was that body. I remember when you had a combination of like BJ Cruz, Ben Pangilinan, Mike San Nicholas, Therese Terlahi. And to an extent, we have some of that now, right? Because Therese Terlahi is still there with Chris Barnett, Talo Taidikwi, and Sabina Perez. But they're not in charge, and it's not like the overwhelming force of the legislature like it was before, when you had like Ben Pangilinan, BJ Cruz. And then even before that, when you had John Solis, Joe Ada, Larry Kasperbauer, Mark Forbes, Tony Anpinko, Eddie Calvo. You had a legislature that worked in its responsibilities to have checks and balances. And the legislature now is retaking that mantle. And at least it's trying to. You have the chairman of the finance committee and his vice chairman. The chairman is Chris Duenas. His vice chairman is Tony Ada, who is the chairman of the Powerful Rules Committee. Also happens to be running for governor, to be fair, right? They have put forth a resolution to start an investigation that would focus and the starting point would be that really bad audit that says, and no matter what how Adaloop tries to spin this, has alleged anywhere from gross negligence to absolute corruption in the spending of federal funds, to the point where they were able to identify $22.6 million in question costs. But more important than that, their inability to determine whether there was more in question costs because the files are missing. The procurement records that are supposed to be there, they're not there. There's no paper trail on how some of these federal funds were spent or how much in federal funds were spent. It's 198 pages of searing, damning allegations against this administration based on the numbers, based on the math, done by independent auditors. If Eddie Calvo or Felix Camacho or Carl Gutierrez, Joe Ada, Ricky Bordallo, Paul Calvo, or Carlos Camacho, all of our previous governors, if any of them had received an audit like this, there would have been the following day the introduction of a recall petition against that governor. At the very least, the very day, the passage of a resolution to investigate the governor. At the very least. And it would come on the heels of reporters from the PDN and the Guam Variety and Guam Cable TV and KOAM News and K57 News Talk Radio sticking microphones and notepads into the faces of senators racing up to Adelup to stick those same microphones in front of the governor, the governor's chief of staff, the governor's spokesman, to find out what's next. Who's going to be held accountable? What's their response to this audit? And whatever that response was, if it didn't make sense, there was going to be follow-up questions. And it was going to be to the point where the senators, within 24 hours, would already know that they did not stand a chance against the people who were pissed about everything, about the stealing of their money or the alleged stealing of their money, unless they sprung into action and used their power in being a check against the power of the administration to, at the very least, start an investigation. And you know who would have been the very first news organization for decades and decades to have made that call for accountability and transparency? It would have been the Pacific Daily News. And if any of us remember the late 1990s going into the early 2000s, the second half of the Gutierrez administration, when there were all of those allegations that were coming out and all the audits that were coming out when Doris Brooks became the public auditor in the year 2000, and she started to pump out those audits, those independent audits. And they began to show things in the different agencies. Don't you remember who was leading the charge? And who was getting it hard? They were kicked out of Adelup for their investigative reports and for their editorials calling for accountability. It was the Pacific Daily News. And so when I looked at the Pacific Daily News this morning, and I saw an editorial that said, "Our view, investigate audit findings, but keep politics out of it." I thought, oh, that was all right. That seems like a gratuitous headline, but let's read what it says. It's a short editorial. Let me read it to you. An audit of the government of Guam's fiscal year 2024 finances uncovered $22.6 million in question costs, missing documentation, and repeated compliance failures that demand investigation. Okay, good so far. But the investigation must be credible, and right now credibility is at risk. Okay, what do you mean, PDN? Republican senators have moved to convene a special investigative subcommittee with blanket subpoena power and a $150,000 budget. Okay, the implication that this is just Republicans. Where, PDN, whoever wrote this editorial, is the line about how there were two Democrats on this same committee who were asked to co-sponsor this resolution, and both those Democrats rejected co-sponsoring this resolution. Who are they, and why would they reject co-sponsoring an investigation resolution after that damning audit? Joe San Augustine, the chairman of the Finance Committee at the time of the fiscal year 2024 audit, and Senator Tina Muñoz Barnes, the running mate of Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio. Of course, PDN fails to put that in there. It's a highly relevant point. Okay, so let's move on. The Democratic administration at Adelup has fired back, calling the effort a political stunt and accusing lawmakers of distorting technical audit findings into campaign ammunition. PDN says this: both sides have a point and both sides have a problem. Really, PDN? You're going to agree that with Adelup that all this is technical audit findings, that what was contained in that 100. Did you even read the audit, PDN? Whoever wrote this editorial? Did you read the line after line after line? And this is, and I don't know, like maybe it requires someone who has taken an accounting class and has seen, the different lines, right? And where the line says, I don't know who's that, where the line says, sorry, I hate it when people call me in the middle of these shows because I just lose my place. It's so annoying. And the line says, asterisk, $0. And you go to the asterisk and it says that the auditors couldn't ascertain what the question cost amount would be because the files were missing. That is not a technical audit finding. That isn't an audit finding that you'll find in any of the audits of the last 25 years or so. That's a finding that you'll see in audits when PDN used to be the leader of the call for accountability. So it's not just a distortion of a technical audit finding. And I don't know why PDN would agree with language like that. And as to the issue of politics, there was a time when the PDN didn't care what time of the year it was when it came to demanding accountability for the readers and the viewers we all serve, for the public we all serve. And the fact that this is an election year, the fact that there is the fact that an audit, it was released not on anyone else's timing, but the public auditor's timing just 2 weeks ago. And the legislature is responding to this, as it should, with a call for an investigation, a legislative investigation. How are those things wrong simply because the administration that's being investigated is running in this election? Why do the people's desires for transparency and accountability have to wait on the subjects of this inquiry simply because they were the ones who decided to run for public office this year? That doesn't make any sense to me, especially coming from a media outlet whose responsibility is to promote and to encourage accountability and transparency. Well, let's continue on. The audit findings are serious, including $17 million in Medicaid funding drawn down without proper documentation. Okay. Another $5.6 million in federal spending booked as miscellaneous with no invoices, no contracts, and no purchase orders. Pretty bad. Then there is $15 million in grants that GovBomb simply failed to use before they expired. This is not something to shrug off. Okay. All right. I mean, the language is probably that they're using is not as strong as it probably should be, but all right, that's up to them, right? But a Republican-led panel investigating a Democratic governor's administration in an election year, with the committee chairman himself seeking re-election, raises legitimate questions about motives. Okay. Motives? So what? What about what's necessary? What about what needs to be done? How about that? And how about PDN failing to mention that the panel, according to this resolution that would be impaneled, would be made of 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. Yes, chaired by a Republican, but the people in the election 2 years ago elected the Republicans to lead this legislature, probably, I would argue, for this very occasion. Because for 6 years prior, the governor was, and her administration were meting out their duties and responsibilities with absolute impunity, just rolling over everything and everyone and not caring whatsoever about transparency and accountability. And the audits are bearing this out. So what that it's a Republican? If this was a Democrat-led panel, does that make a difference? Who cares what party is leading this investigation? It's an investigation that needs to be done. So the PDN asks, is this about accountability or about headlines? I sure as heck hope it's about both. I really do. Because this is an investigation being led by one of the two political branches of the government. And it's a part of a journey toward accountability and transparency. One of those parts has done his job, the OPA, in preparing a nonpartisan investigation that provided a foundation for this political investigation. And political in the sense, I'm not talking about in a partisan sense, I'm talking about that this is part of a body politic. That the legislature, representing us, the people and the voters of this island, has decided that there are way too many questions here. And the sorts of things that an audit isn't able to uncover, those headlines that we all need as a population, as a society, to understand, to be educated, to be informed about what's going on. Those are the things that need to come out. And you know who needs to write those headlines? The media. In its objective, nonpartisan job, a role that it has been remiss to accomplish over the past 8 years of rolling over for the administration time and time again, scandal after scandal, not doing its job. So is this about accountability or about headlines? The PDN asks. It has to be about both. What are you talking about, PDN? Like, how does that even make sense? And it doesn't even, like, it rots at your core when you think that it's a media company, it's a newsroom that's writing this. Or is this going to be the last 8 years where we're just going to change our stripes as newsrooms because it's the more comfortable thing to do and not write those headlines? Continuing on, Adeloop is not above suspicion either. Dismissing the audit as routine paperwork problems while $22.6 million sits unaccounted for does not inspire confidence. These guys are way too kind to Adeloop. If the administration has nothing to hide, it should welcome scrutiny, not from political opponents, but from an independent authority. That's what the OPA was. That's what the media is supposed to be. But the media failed at its job. So thankfully, the legislature has come in. If this was a question about if the media was actually doing its job, there'd be less necessity for this legislative investigation. But here's what baffles me about this PDN editorial is that, like, I'm chomping at the bit. I have to imagine that anybody who is curious about the last 8 years of the spending of public funds has to be chomping at the bit for information that would come out as a result of this investigation, for documents that would be put forward from subpoenas, from testimony that would be given under oath by subpoena, things that the media isn't able to do because the media doesn't have the power of subpoena. I would imagine that anyone, especially the media, would be encouraging this investigation because of the propensity of the potential for getting answers that we were never able to get before because we could never compel answers. We could never compel the type of documents that would come out from an investigation. And if this investigation is done right, if there is an investigator who knows what he or she is doing, or a team of investigators who know what they are doing, if the senators have the brain power to ask the right questions and to go down the right path, then this can uncover so much that the number one, the media failed to or was unable to cover, and secondly, that the public wants to know. And the reason the public doesn't know already, a lot of it is because the media didn't do its job. Let the politicians worry about their own elections. How the politics of this affects the partisan election this year has nothing to do with the media. Media, just stay out of that. And just do our jobs. Just bring these matters to light. The fact that the legislature has to do this for us, it says something about the state of media in this island. Hold on, let me check if I need to check if hold on. Let me message Senator Ada because I'm supposed to bring him in on a call to talk about the investigation. He's the vice chairman of the committee, of the finance committee. He's also the chairman of the rules committee, and they're the ones who are going to decide whether this investigation is going to happen. I wrote down some of my notes. I was just reviewing my notes. There is something that I forgot to mention. The PDN is calling for an independent investigation. Well, number one, the OPA has done an independent audit. There's that. That's not a full investigation. Granted, it's an audit. Who's going to do the independent investigation if it's not the media? And why wouldn't we welcome help from the legislative branch in the securing of documents and witness testimony that would be out in the public, by the way? Why wouldn't we welcome something like that in our roles of conducting the independent investigation? And furthermore, where was the PDN in 2022 when highly reputable and credible political sources were saying out loud in televised debates that the PDN covered itself? Where was the media? Where was the PDN when then candidate Michael Nicholas and then candidate Felix Camacho were accusing the Leon Guerrero Tenorio administration of the corrupt use of federal funds back in 2022? And we know that these allegations bore out in at least one federal court case now. But they said this back in 2022. And they not only called to light these allegations of the corrupt use of federal funds, they called for an inspector general, a local and a federal inspector general, to be promulgated to investigate the administration, and two, a full-fledged media independent investigation of the Leon Guerrero Tenorio administration's use of federal funds. That was back in 2022. That was 4 years ago. 4 years before this editorial, where they're calling for an independent investigation. Where was the PDN when these people were calling for an independent investigation back then? And what over the last 4 years has the PDN done to independently investigate allegations of corruption against this administration? So what is this? What is this? Is this a circle jerk? Is this incompetence? Is this more nefarious than that? Why are we hesitant in the media to do our jobs? And why are we sugarcoating this thing? And why are we not encouraging a full-fledged legislative investigation? We shouldn't be changing our stripes on this. We need to be doing our jobs. Okay, so I think we can get Senator Ada on the phone right now.
Hello.
Hi, good morning, Vice Speaker Ada. This is Troy at Kandit, and you're on live with us on Kandit Live. Thank you so much for taking our call.
Hi, good morning, Troy.
Good morning. Good morning. So first, Vice Speaker, what sort of feedback are you getting from the community since the introduction of the investigation resolution?
Well, so I've been out there since the introduction of the resolution, and the sentiments of the community is that they're glad that something of this nature is coming forward, and they just like to see not just a introduction, but some type of finality with it, right? Whatever conclusions come out of the investigation, and they just want it done in a very open and truthful way. So absolutely, but they're really I think that the community at large is very open to this resolution.
What do you say to because you're running for governor, right? Yeah, and there's the criticism that would come that you're you're part of this resolution that essentially is calling for the investigation into an administration, one party of which might be your opponent in the general election. What's your response to Adaloop's criticism that this investigation is just political, or that you guys are politicizing this audit?
I don't think it can be deemed as political, only because this was an audit that was, should have been conducted over 297 days ago, something like that. That should have been completed, and it was not. It just happens to be concluded at this point in time during. This is an election year, but to say it's politicized, no, I don't think it is. It's not. Because of the fact that these are things that still need to be done. I mean, we still have a duty to the community in ensuring that we continue to do our work.
Vice Speaker, what is your, we didn't get a chance to interview you after this audit came out, but when you saw the audit, what were your initial thoughts, and what are your thoughts now about the findings?
It's very, very, very concerning. Not only just on the money that the funds that have been that are being disclosed about, but also more importantly, funds that are being returned to the federal government as well, right? I mean, it's very concerning because every time we lose funding, it puts us in a more dire situation, because they may not fund us in the future, saying, well, you guys didn't use it before, you guys returned it. We're not going to give you any additional funding for these programs, or even you couldn't account for the funds that were given to you. How are we going to be able to know that those particular funds were used for that program? And when the funds are given, Troy, they're not just given and say, hey, do what you please, and hopefully you come back with some type of reporting. No, you're getting these funds based on your initial application to a grant, that or even the acceptance of the funds, saying we're going to abide by these strict guidances and rules, that reporting back and utilizing them for the intended purposes always should be first and foremost when we report back to the federal government. And I think this will always, this resolution would find, that are we reporting, and are we reporting as required, or where do we need to strengthen and ensure that the funds are utilized for the exact reasons that they were given for?
Former Guam Congressman Michael St. Nicholas, in his show on Kandit last night, he pointed something out. He said, look, this is just an audit of 1 year, and this is just an audit of federal programs in 1 year. What about everything else? And so, what I wonder, Vice Speaker, as the legislature moves forward with the budget process, um, how do you trust what's coming out of the administration, considering these audits and allegations of misconduct and corruption that have been made against the administration?
And that's where the finance chair as well, working with OFB, working with BBMR, these are the questions that have to be asked, and these are the questions that need to be answered. Are they giving us the exact figures and balances that we need to make a sound decision in ensuring that the budget that we move forward with is um, the truthful numbers that we're going to be able to live off the next fiscal year.
Vice Speaker, oh,
It's Go ahead.
no, no, go ahead, sir. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that um, in the end, we just need to account for. We all need to be held accountable for what we do and how we do things.
Vice Speaker, let's say um, the federal jury makes a conviction in the corruption case, or let's say that the findings of this investigation committee are such that there was wrongdoing that was found. Obviously, that would upset public confidence in the government of Guam as a whole. How how can that confidence or that trust be restored with such an erosion?
Then bringing confidence back to the government um, is going to be. I mean, and Troy, it doesn't take this audit or any federal cases that are ongoing. This has been happening, right? And people have over the years lost trust in our government. They have lost trust, and with this, especially with this legislature, the 38th Guam legislature, we've really worked hard over this past 18 months now, 16 months to bring and work to bring confidence and trust back into our government. Are the whatever the outcomes of these the special investigation, in which the chairman will be the one to select his committee members, or whatever comes out of the federal cases. We're gonna have to get government back to basic and rebuild what is lost, and rebuild that for our people.
I remember, a lot of us remember in 2022, you were the running mate for Felix Camacho, right? You were running for lieutenant governor at that time. And in a series of debates and in some public stuff, first it was Michael St. Nicholas running for governor against Lulian Guerrero, right? And then it was in the general election, Felix Camacho against Lulian Guerrero. And both of those men made allegations at the time that there was the corrupt use or the wrong use of federal funds that came out of the pandemic. And both of their allegations were ignored, not just by the voters, but also by the media. The media was instead focusing on the allegations against Michael St. Nicholas from an ethics investigation that ended up going nowhere, but it went nowhere after the election. It was a little too late for Mike St. Nicholas, right?
Uh-huh.
What are your thoughts? 4 years later, and we're at this place right now. But having witnessed that, having you were the running mate for the guy who made the allegations, one of the two who made the allegations of corruption and the corrupt use of federal funds. 4 years later, with where we are now, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, we can go 4 years back, which we can't. Um, Perhaps a different path would have been taken, right? And that's why I'm saying, Troy, we really need to get down to the bottom of this, find out what is going on, what we need to do to correct these issues, and perhaps a forensic audit on everything within the government. How were funds used within the different agencies and departments, because we're all held to an accountable standard. And I think the current statute is 3 years after you leave you leave government, and perhaps that's something that needs to be changed so that we can continue to hold people accountable, even if they left government in 4 years or 5 years. So these are the things that we need to reevaluate. We need to relook at, and if statute needs to be changed, that's what has to be done so that we continue to hold folks accountable for the actions they've done when they were in government.
You're talking about the official misconduct statute.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can we circle back to this idea of a forensic audit? Is this something that your colleagues and you are talking about in funding OPA to conduct?
This was it was a conversation. I'm not sure if you recall that when former Governor Felix Camacho and I were running, that it was brought up then, right, about doing a forensic audit of the different departments and agencies within our government, and that was part of our campaign back then in the last election.
Is that something that you and EJ Calvo are pushing as one of your platform planks in this election?
Accountability of funds within the government, and that belongs to our taxpayers. We always have to do a financial audit of the funds so that we can ensure. Sometimes when you take over an organization, or you do an audit when you first come in, right, so that that what issues are within that organization, and how the funds were expended during the time before you came in. And you want to make sure that when you leave, that you're leaving things in a better position than when you got them.
Vice Speaker, thank you so much. Is there anything else you wanted to add to this subject?
Troy, I just want to let the people know that this is not a witch hunt. This is not something that we went looking for, the legislature. This is an issue that was brought after the audit that was conducted by Ernst & Young, and also concerns of the public auditor. So naturally, if we don't act, what does that say about our fiduciary responsibility? And we need to ensure that, that we continue to have faith and confidence, that the people continue to have faith and confidence in our government, that, regardless of the outcome, that we're doing our best to ensure that our taxpayer dollars and the money that's given to us by the federal government is accounted for.
This is going to be a very weird question that in another era of our existence would have never been asked, but what do you ask the media to do?
I just ask the media to be very, very mindful, right, of what's going on, and to, back in the day, there used to be investigative reporters, and today sometimes when we look at how media conducts things, they're just reporters. I think they need to continue to do their due diligence in investigative reporting and report the truth, right? That's just reporting the truth. Don't be biased to one individual or one organization or party or whatever it may be. Just be very neutral that they should be.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. I appreciate your time and your thoughts this morning.
Thank you, Troy. I appreciate you.
God bless you. Bye.
God bless. Bye-bye.
As Vice Speaker Tony Atta with his thoughts on this whole thing. All right. And I think we've spoken enough about this subject. On the other side of the commercial break, I want to bring you I'm going to play for you a scene that played out before the legislature. It was a public hearing about a bill to amend a recently enacted law that creates easier pathways for qualified foreign doctors to practice in Guam. And it was a very interesting back and forth that occurred between or among Dr. Tom Shieh, Dr. Nate Berg, and Senator Tello Taitigui. We'll get to that on the other side of this commercial break. Stick with us. Yes, that's me, a fat boy, eating all that good food as a promotion for our advertisers. Look, look at me. Look at this. Look at this. I'm back on my diet this week. And so the adventures of a fat boy. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for staying with us. It's 9 a.m. on Thursday, May 7, 2026. My name is Troy Torres. This is the Thursday News Analysis. I appreciate all of you who are watching this live and those of you watching the replay of this. Don't forget that tonight at 7:30 p.m. is the Troy Torres Show. Sometimes, well, let me just explain our lineup. From Monday to Friday, our lineup is there's a show every morning at 8 a.m. It's called the morning, the news analysis for the mornings. It's the Monday news analysis, the Tuesday news analysis, etc. Right? And then at 7:30 p.m. there is an evening show, and it's either the Troy Torres Show or the Reality Check with Michael St. Nicholas. And I'm in talks with two people to take over two more of those slots. I'm trying to phase myself out of Kandit by the end of this year. Not completely, but I'm trying to do less work on the air and more work writing and more work researching. Anyway, and as of last week, we are simulcasting these live streams on our three social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. So right now, if you're watching on Facebook, know that there's an audience also watching on Instagram and on YouTube and on the other channels. Know that this is all around, right? On Sunday, we also have two shows, a morning show and an evening show. The evening show is at 7:30 p.m., but the morning show, I don't give it a time slot because it all depends what time I'm assigned by my parish to serve at church. And so, like, I cannot promise you that I'm going to have an 8 a.m. show if I'm assigned to be at 8 a.m. Mass. And Mass absolutely takes priority over anything else that I do. So I just wanted to let you know that that's our schedule. There was a hearing that happened, I don't know, it was yesterday or 2 days ago. It was by Senator Sabrina Salas Matsinani, and it was about a bill that would strengthen some licensure requirements that recently were enacted by the legislature in a statute by Telo Taidagui that passed and that the governor signed. And it was a contentious thing because there are some doctors who were like, hey, this is not fair. The private sector was not included in this. You have to include the private sector. But there was pushback on the government side, and not from a government person, but from the chair of the Guam Board of Medical Examiners, Dr. Nate Berg, who was like, look, this is because of the reason we did it this way is because we need to shore up these issues in the public sector. Like, we need the doctors over at GMH and at public health and all this stuff, right? And then Dr. Berg says something else. He says, plus, we don't really know what's happening on the private sector side and we can't trust it. And then Dr. Shieh. Anyway, you know what? It's better that you just hear it for yourself. You got to watch this stuff. This stuff writes itself, I swear. And there's no need for an introduction on it, actually. So here is that exchange. We're going to watch about 20 minutes or so of this.
Protect the public. And I would feel I wouldn't be doing that if I allowed, if not me, that I'd allow. But my opinion is that allowing that to happen would not allow adequate oversight. Give us a couple years to deal with this. Then I'll be right back here saying thank you for allowing us to have people at HPLO. We've well trained them. They understand the process. We have a nice system in place. We'll promulgate our rules and regulations for the board so that we can do oversight, but we just can't do it immediately, not right out of the gate, so to speak. Give us 2 years, I think is reasonable, and then we revisit and say, can we now expand this into the public arena? I hope so. I think if we do this carefully, we should be able to do this, yeah. But let's start out at the proper pace, I guess. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor.
I don't have a whole lot else to say, but again, if there are questions from the senators, I'll remain.
Thank you, Dr. Berg. I have to say, though, what is dangerous is how this bill, this ITP pathway, became law. It was inserted into another bill, which did have a public hearing, but this ITP pathway did not. It was not vetted. Medical community didn't have input. They didn't have a say. So I tend to disagree with you in terms of when we're talking about danger and we're talking about putting the cart before the horse, because we sure did when this law or this bill was enacted into law. Dr. Edison, you wanted to make a comment regarding EMTALA?
Oh yeah, just we as a CMS certified facility, we are bound by federal law, which is EMTALA. We cannot, just to clarify, we do not turn away patients who come to our emergency room. We stabilize, we provide the appropriate care. We draw from the same population as our brothers at GMH. On island, we have an uninsured rate that hovers between 9 to 12%, and that same uninsured rate mirrors our patient mix. Those are the same patients that also come into us, our doors. We also have long stay patients, which is defined by Medicare as a patient staying more than six months in the hospital. We have those patients as well. We try to find solutions for them. We try to find alternative housing any way that we can to help the patients. We seek the same government services through the Office of the Public Guardian. We tap our local resources with St. Dominic's, trying to find placements for these patients. And in certain circumstances where the patient really does not have the resources to be able to afford it, we pay for their care to be done at St. Dominic's. Meaning that we cut the check to ensure that these patients are taken care of. Because there are also dangers with having patients who do not need to be in a hospital in an acute care setting, right? So it's a challenge. I think that it's the reality of practicing and having operations on Guam. So I mean, it's something that's unique, it's something that's challenging, but it's something that we all share in terms of the responsibility.
Yeah, just one more point addressing Dr. Berg's question. Me and Dr. Berg, we can talk all day, okay? One thing about Dr. Berg's point about the private sector lacks oversight, that's totally untrue. In order to be an associate professor, a clinical professor for the University of Hawaii, Japson, for example, which I am, they oversight. I have to turn in clinical cases for them to review. I have to do a lot of things in order for me to be able to remain as a professor of a training center. Same's true with board certification. Okay? The oversight for GRMC, Joint Commission, they have to respond to Joint Commission. GMH is not accredited. We're trying to get some accreditation, but we're not going for Joint Commission because I don't think we're ready yet. But we will get that accreditation, and I'm helping them. I've been there for accreditation for the Naval Hospital. Dr. Berg was there. I've been there for the last accreditation for the GMH when Dr. Mike Cruz was there under the Camacho administration. So I know what accreditation takes, and I'm going to help GMH get accredited. But don't ever put down the private sector again. I don't know why we keep putting down the private sector, and it just doesn't make sense. We're here to help you. Can Guam survive without Dr. Berg's clinic? I don't think so. Can Guam survive without Dr. Shieh's clinic? Maybe, but I don't think so. We're all here together, one community. And I understand the safety factor, what Dr. Berg has mentioned, okay? I don't want physicians out here practicing that's unsafe. But if you look at the statistics, look at the data, on the community of Guam, probably GMH, and unfortunately, that they probably had the most quote-unquote liability cases, okay, unfortunately. So if we talk about safety and oversight, I'm not sure if you can compare that to the private sector where we have oversight as well. And the Guam board can set up a system where we have to make sure that we cross the the dots and check off the boxes. I know the system. I read it. I read exactly what's required and what's recommended by the Federation of State Medical Boards. And I so wish the State of Medical Boards was here, Dr. Berg, and reached out to me, the President of Guam Medical Association, so that we can have a powwow and a roundtable. But instead, we're up to this point, and we're talking about this disagreement. You disagree with me, I disagree with your approach. I sure wish that we had sat in a room, a private room, and talk about this before it was shoved down the throats of the legislature. And I don't know, the outer loop has said it before, right? Basically, we have no say. Unfortunately, that's the case, and I can't wait for the next election.
Thank you, Dr. Shieh. We're going to open up it up to allow my colleagues to ask questions. And we'll begin with the author of Bill 303, Senator Taitigui.
Will I be able to close too as well after the questions?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, first, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I think it was clear when Dr. Eusebio mentioned the issue about Guam Memorial Hospital, about public health, about our government of Guam facilities. And if anybody is, bad-mouthing private sector, I don't think that's the case. I think it's private sector bad-mouthing Guam Memorial Hospital and all the other public facilities on this island. And why do you think they're trying so hard right now to better themselves, to find ways to cover it? Dr. Eusebio hit it on the nose when he said that we can't even get $30 million, to fix all the other facilities. And the facility that is required, Dr. Shieh, are you required required to take any patient that comes into your clinic? Are you required to?
That question was already answered.
And I'm going to ask you again.
No, we're not required. And Dr. Berg
you're not
mentioned that as
required
well.
to do that. So do you think that the majority of people on this island can afford private doctors or private clinics?
Yes.
You think the majority of people on this island can afford that?
Yes.
Okay, well, you are colorful at making your comments. I don't.
Oh, I wouldn't say I'm
that.
colorful. I think
very colorful in doing that. So,
Dr.
Shieh, I'm asking the questions
you asked me
here.
A question. I'm answering your question.
And another question I have for you too.
No, let me finish the question you asked.
In the public law that was passed in 2006, is there any possibility for any foreign doctor to work at a private clinic? The public law that was recently passed in 2006, is there any foreign doctor that can work?
Not under the ITP section, which you inserted.
No, I asked you a question.
I'm answering your question.
The law that was passed.
I'm answering your question.
Is there an opportunity for a doctor to work at a private clinic?
The law in 2006 allowing people to work in a private section, there's two pathways, okay?
Exactly. One that allows for private...
Let me answer your question. Can I answer your question?
Oh, you did.
No,
I
didn't.
You.
I
no,
didn't.
I heard you. You said...
The answer is this.
There is two pathways.
The pathway that you say you pass under the Conrad 30 system,
right.
That's already federal law. It doesn't make no difference. The difference is here. Under the ITP pathway creates a double standard of care. And that pathway does not allow the private sector to hire ITPs.
So there is an opportunity for doctors to work in the private sector under the J1, the Conrad 30, like Mr. Malo had mentioned earlier, or Dr. Manalo, right?
Dr. Manaloto.
Sorry, I apologize. So there is a pathway for that, for these doctors. And it's ultimately up to these doctors who answer the call. And if I'm not mistaken, I know that Dr. Berg, and the question I have for Dr. Berg, have you received any doctors who are interested in either of the pathways through the ITP or the foreign medical? That's for Dr.
There is a physician, well-qualified physician who has practiced in the Philippines for, I think, 10 years, maybe closer to 20 years, who has a reason that she wants to be here. Apparently, comes to Guam frequently. Her son is here, and so she wants to relocate here. And I haven't looked at anything other than her resume or CV, and she looks very qualified. And I think there have already been some others. I think maybe even your office received some.
Yes, we received two doctors questioning on that. So, Dr. Berg, has she decided whether to go to the ITP or the FMGs, the foreign medical graduates?
ITP, because they've been in practice for a long period of time. I might add, Senator, they ultimately, your bill requires that they pass all 3 steps of USMLE. The advantage, and the FSMB folks mentioned this, is that we smartly said you don't have to pass steps 1 and 2 to get here. You have to pass them, but you don't have to pass them before you get here. So those highly experienced doctors can come in and get started right away and get monitored very closely while they're getting ready to take 1 and 2, and eventually they must pass step 3 after, I think it's 3 years, if I recall. After 3 years, they must pass it. So the answer is yes, and they're aware of that need to do that.
Dr. Berg, is the ITPs much more stringent than the FMG?
To a certain extent, yes, in that the licensures for the FMGs who can come out, the Conrad 30s, are completely unrestricted, and which is maybe a big benefit for private sector. But I myself, we've hired several and been very happy with it. They are there. You can get them there. I like the fact that we've now defined the separate pathways. Yes, one is a federal program, but we've defined how it works on Guam, and you've made a point of saying it's available for private practice. And it's I think we're all going to be faced with this challenge of the $100,000 fee, but it would seem to me in my reading that probably physicians will be exempt from that in the near future. So yes, both pathways are good for Guam, but one have already passed all of their residency programs. That's why we don't oppose it. They've passed the residency program, the same type of residency programs that I passed. Some have been through extraordinary programs. We have one physician who went through 4 fellowships at the University of Washington. He's extraordinarily well qualified, and I think extremely highly respected. He didn't need any supervision. He already was board certified, having passed, but did need to be, as an IMG, go through the Conrad 30 program. So it's out there, but that's not going to serve the needs of the public to fill the gaps that we have at Guam Memorial Hospital.
Okay, Dr. Berg, can I ask you a question?
So, excuse me, Madam Chair. He's interrupting. If you could hold off.
After you.
Thank you.
You can allow him to speak.
Okay.
I'll allow him to speak.
Yep. So I'll let you know if I have the mic, so if I have a question, I will ask him. But
And
you're
I'm the
welcome
committee
after,
chair,
you're
so I'm
welcome after
allowing
I'm done
Dr.
to
Shieh
speak.
to speak, something that, these doctors weren't allowed to speak
But it's my time,
before.
Madam Chair. I have
We are
my
monitoring
chair.
the time.
Right, I have 2
Dr.
minutes
Shieh,
and 47 minutes, and I
you're
want to get my
holding the
questions.
clock. We're allowing
I don't
the
want to be
public,
broken.
the doctor,
Madam
to speak,
Chair,
to respond.
It's my turn to ask the questions. If you
And
want to
I
sit
am
there
the
and
chair
try
of this
and
committee,
dictate
and
how I'm supposed to ask
Dr.
the way
Shieh,
my
you may proceed
questions,
in
Okay,
responding.
then you can
I'll
ask
make it
during
short.
your time.
I will make it short, okay?
Unbelievable.
Currently,
talk
under
about a
Unbelievable
democracy.
is allowing and merging a bill without
democracy,
allowing the public to testify on it.
Let me finish my question
Dr.
to
Shieh,
Dr.
you may
Berg.
proceed.
Yeah, without Bill 206
Oh, my
passing into
gosh.
public law right now,
This is ridiculous.
even GMH can hire foreign doctors. It's not just
Yeah.
a private sector. You don't need Bill 206 to 38 and insert ITP. If you want to hire, the question is better asked: can GMH hire foreign doctors without the passage of that Bill 206 that had the public hearing under Conrad 30? That's federal law. You don't even need that bill to hire foreign doctors. So the question is, even Dr. Berg knows this, okay? Even Dr. Malaloto will tell you, Conrad 30 is a more strict system, is a more rigid, because you have to pass the USMLE. You have to have the training system there. But you don't need that Bill 206. And I'd say that in my testimony, GMH does not need that 206 bill to pass into law to hire foreign doctors. We both can. The problem that I have is that the insertion of the language from 294, the bill from Adelup, without a public hearing, bypassing that democratic process of the people of Guam so desire. If you're going to ask us to trust the Guam Medical Board, the Guam Medical Board members should say that was wrong what they did. They should have had that public hearing, and that bill should not have been passed by insertion that way. Because you should allow the people of Guam, to allow the community doctors to have a say. And that did not happen. okay? And you're going to ask us to trust the Guam Medical Board when they know for a fact that that was inserted without a public hearing. Where is the accountability and the oversight for the Guam Medical Boards? The Federation of State Medical Boards didn't even update their website as of April, just last week, when I downloaded the website that says that particular law that had the public hearing is on their website. I sure wish I can talk to the Guam Federation of Medical Boards and testify in front of them and see what this board has done. It's inappropriate to insert such a language into a bill without a public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Shieh, or Dr. Shieh. And number one, this body is the one that appoints the medical board. So if there's trust, well, it has to be voted on.
Absolutely, I agree.
If the private sector wanted to hire foreign medical doctors, absolutely. What Bill 206 did, it provided a pathway, and it stayed that pathway. That's why it was germane to the bill. I didn't only just put one opportunity on a pathway, I put two opportunities in pathway. One that is codified, which we usually do when it comes to federal laws. Sometimes we codify it in the Guam law. What we did, the question is, then if it's so an option out there, then why hasn't the private sector gone after the J1 visa Conrad opportunity?
That's not
and
true.
And now that, well,
oh,
I'm
no,
just
that's
saying.
Not true. You asked me a question why.
No,
you asked me a question why. Let me answer that. You said why we didn't.
Why haven't you gone after it? But
yes,
there are
did.
doctors who
yes,
have
we
gone
did.
after that.
I hired a J1. Yeah. I gone through the Conrad 30.
Exactly.
And I testified. But you said why we didn't.
Well,
that's not true.
No, I'm talking about the other private.
You're saying that there's
you
have no clue on healthcare legislation.
Wait a minute, Dr. Shieh.
Okay,
wait a minute.
Let's calm down and refrain
exactly,
from
because you have the
insults.
opportunity in that route. I mean, Doctor from GMRC had that opportunity as well to go down that route. So nothing stops the private sector from looking at foreign medical doctors. Now you have to remember, these foreign medical doctors, they're going to decide themselves which one they want to go. If they want to go to the private sector, they go under the FMG. If they want to go into work for the public sector, they can go to the ITP. But what this bill does on 302, it actually takes some of the safety mechanism that's in here to protect this community. And at the FSME, you have every opportunity to give them a call, Dr. Shieh, since you know them so well. You can give them a call and ask them, why did they support the ITP? Why did they provide opportunities for foreign medical doctors to follow the same constringents that GMRC is so proud of today, that they can be certified and accredited because of the qualifications for these doctors that they have to. Your amendments here, which, by the way, Dr. Berg, have you seen Dr. Shieh's amendments?
What are Dr. Shieh's amendments, Senator Tedek,
his comments
on,
I just wonder if you saw his testimony, testimony. Have you seen that, Dr. Berg?
I have.
You've seen what the recommendations he's making.
I respectfully disagree with them.
Is there anything in here that takes away the safety of these doctors that we bring to Guam? As far as like qualifications that they need.
I think if you're bringing in a totally new system of internationally trained physicians who have not gone through U.S. residencies, you remove the safety if you put them out into private practice. Yes, and the parity is real. If you want, in that they can, right now, they have parity. They can hire international graduates who've already been vetted through residency programs. GMH has the unique, as Dr. Eusebio mentioned, the unique obligation. I appreciate Dr. Manaloto saying that they by being a hospital, they have to take patients in, whoever comes into the ER, but it's not quite the same. They can turn patients away, except in that emergency room setting. They don't have to keep patients in. They do, and they act as a solid member of the community. I have nothing negative to say in that, zero. But the reality is they're not under the obligation to treat anybody on for elective surgeries and things of that nature. I think they make an effort to do so, to be a good member of the community. I mean, they make an excellent effort to do so, more so than the vast majority of private facilities. But it's not the same, because I could brag, and Hua could too, and rightfully so, that we see a huge number of patients who can't pay. We see a huge number of patients who can only partly pay. We do it. We never make them feel bad. We do everything we can to never turn them away, but we're not legally obligated to. We are not the last refuge. Our doors can close. Both of them could close. We could change the policy. GMH can't change that policy. That's the real difference.
Thank you, Dr. Berg. I'm looking forward to hearing your comments, both from, especially Dr. Thorpe, because, I've worked with him on the last bill. He had some comments and suggestions that I'm actually going to, look through thoroughly on it. But I also like to have you look at Dr. Shieh's comments he made, because some of these are, he goes super fast because maybe he doesn't want me to, or want us to ask any questions, or, so fast that, you can say whatever he wants to say, but we can look at the videotape. Also, Dr. Shieh, you constantly saying that it's not a democracy to let this bill go through, or 2-6 to go through, and you're saying how it should have had an opportunity to have a public hearing on it. It's the same pathway as I mentioned, but then Dr. Shieh, you text me, and I've sent it. I've sent this text to other people to show that you actually said, yes, let it go through. That was your comment to my text.
Do you want me to explain that text?
Oh, it was easy. The text clearly said, let it go through after we talked.
No,
and
the comment says, the comment I tell you this, okay? I already gave you my opinion. If you want to make it go through, that's up to you. That's exactly what I meant. I already gave you my opinion, and I said you should defer it, take it back to committee, and let's get it all together, because it should be re-vetted and have a public hearing.
Let it go through is fine. I gave my input.
I gave my input. That's up to you. That's what I said.
You made it clear that we can get it through and then make any changes. But the whole point is that we can't delay. We've got doctors already knocking on our door wanting to come in here. Of course, they have to go through the visa program first in order to go through here. But we've got doctors ready to come on.
They don't need the bill to come here.
The way the bill is written today, or the way the law is written today, we've got doctors who are already answering the call.
Thank you,
so
Senator
delaying
Tygwe.
is just ridiculous. It's just another tactic to delay.
There's no tactic to delay.
Thank you,
We all
Senator
want what's best for
Tygwe.
Guam.
Senator Gumatauto.
Before you turn the clock on, so are we able to ask questions on both bills right now, Chair?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to start on the first one if I can. Dr. Berg, can you please tell us for the record how many physicians hold valid medical licenses in Guam?
Yeah, I suppose I can. It's somewhere around between 600 and 700 at any given time. But Senator, I would say that there are people from the HPLO office there. Somewhere between.
Well, let me just tell you that I don't really understand fully this issue, but I am here for all of that. You want to have a back and forth between two doctors mediated by a senator, and that senator just goes for it. I am here for it. Dr. Shieh wants to just go for it in front of Senator Tygwe and the whole panel and the whole Guam and the whole world. I am here for it. Now, I have no idea who's right in this thing. I mean, I do have an idea, but I'm not learned enough about the issue. But anytime you want to have a legislative fight, I'm all for it. We're going to play that one on Kandit, and everyone's going to see that that's what's happening. Now, I have to tell you, one of my favorite parts of that exchange or that whole scene was when Senator Selo Tygwe, after she's done with Dr. Shieh, she turns to Dr. Berg and she's like, Dr. Berg, what do you think about what Dr. Shieh said in his testimony? You know, when we were in the Calvo administration together, actually one of my best friends in the Calvo administration, because our offices were right next to each other, and so anytime we would have what was called senior staff meetings, and it was every 8 a.m. Monday and Thursday. And so on the way to these meetings, like probably we were all early birds. We were all in our offices like at 6:30, 7 o'clock. So there would be a lot of lead time to these meetings, and we would and Tello and I, we would either gossip about whatever, but mostly it was helping each other out with whatever issues. At the time, she was the legislative liaison, and Tello's got this personality where it's not surprising that there were senators who didn't like her, and so she always had these issues with some. I won't say who the senators were, but there were some senators who did not just couldn't work with her, right? And 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 so we developed a relationship walking back and forth these senior staff meetings or whatever, right? So I can, whenever I see her like doing stuff like this, I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, that's definitely Tello. And her trying to incite that fight between Dr. Shieh and Dr. Berg, that is classic Tello. If I were in the legislature, that's absolutely something I would try to do, because I'm cut from that same mean girl cloth. This is why I go to church. This is why my journey in Christianity is something that I value very much, because I need to rid myself of that kind of. That's just who I am. Anyway, on the other side, we can talk more about the actual issue involved there. I was saying that I get a sense as to which side is right, and we can talk about that more. But David Lebowski, he is learned in these issues, and he has a way of explaining things that make things very simple, that take very complicated matters and make things very simple. And so I would recommend reading what he has to say on this subject. The last thing I want to talk to you about is a story that comes out of Saipan that has implications for Guam. And it is a story about the sentencing of a mother in a mother-daughter co-defendant case involving the corrupt use of federal funds in the CNMI, and the sentence that the judge gave, and the fact that aside from the parallels, some of the parallels to the Guam corruption case story is the coincidence of who is involved, and it is the judge. We'll get to that on the other side of this commercial break. Stick with.
We delivered. Guam AutoSpot is extending our overstock sell-off with the hottest deals on island, like our 2025 GMC Canyon with $4,000 off. Or slide into a brand new Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross, starting at just $24,995. September is your chance to drive big and save even bigger. Visit us today or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com or call 478-AUTO. Guam AutoSpot, where the savings never stop.
Man, that pizza commercial, that actually, I think I want to eat that today. I think I want to eat a thin crust pepperoni pizza with pineapples. I think that's exactly what I want to eat today. Anyway, so there is a story in the Marianas Press, and I believe it's by Tomas Manglotnia. Let me double check. I'm so sorry. It's by Mark Robigo from Marianas Press. And it's titled Manglotnia Rejects Leniency, Cites Befuddling Mother-Daughter Scheme in Sentencing Adlawan Butalid. Now, Manglotnia is the name of the judge, Judge Ramona Manglotnia. She is the chief judge of the U.S. District Court of the CNMI. Adlawan and Butalid, they are a mother-daughter duo. They are the co-defendants in this case. They were convicted at trial, and they were convicted of swindling federal funds out of the CNMI Public School System's Office of Curriculum and Instruction. And it was funds meant for, I think it was special education. I'm sorry, the Child Care and Development Fund. And I believe it was for, hold on. Anyway, the the parallels in this case to the Tenorio corruption case are just striking. So, according to the feds and according to this trial in the case, um, the IRS special agent who investigated testified that Adlawan paid kickbacks to two officials connected to the Child Care and Development Fund with documented amounts including $5,000 and $15,000 initially, followed by additional payments tied to contract renewals and other transactions. The testimony, this is according to Mark Robigo's story, backed by bank records and ledgers, does that sound familiar? Recovered from Adlawan's apartment, detailed a pattern of monthly kickbacks and gifts, including luxury items, specifically jewelry and designer bags, including Louis Vuitton pieces typically given at the end of contract periods in exchange for facilitating contracts. Both women were also sentenced to 3 years of supervised release and ordered to pay a $200 assessment. Manglotnia imposed joint and several liability for restitution totaling $548,788. Investigators said more than $1.2 million flowed through accounts linked to the scheme, with hundreds of thousands of dollars remitted overseas. Manglotnia said restitution need not be calculated to the exact penny, rejecting arguments that the government failed to precisely quantify losses tied to kickbacks. There's a whole lot more to this story, but I just wanted to kind of bring you some of the parts that sound very familiar to the Tenorio corruption case. Where, anyway, so before I get to that, what Judge Manglotnia ended up doing, so the feds, they recommended something according to the sentencing guidelines. In federal court, there are these sentencing guidelines. And, you know, there's a range, and you get credit for certain things, and you get dinged for certain things. So, for example, if you didn't take it to trial, if you were convicted by plea agreement, you get a certain what do they call it? Drop down in the ladder of the sentencing guideline, and you get basically you get the chance for a reduced sentence. So let's pretend that that you got convicted of drug dealing, and the sentencing guidelines, and you got convicted of 1 count of conspiracy and 1 count of distribution. And so the sentencing would be anywhere from, I believe it would be, if I'm not mistaken, 1 year on the drug possession, or the possession of 50 grams or more, because I think it's 1 to 5 years for the having it part, and then the distribution part. And then the conspiracy, I believe, is a 10-year sentence. Let's pretend that is what it is, right? And so that's anywhere from 5 years to 10 years that you would get. So let's pretend that the range is 6 years. That's 1 for the distribution and 5 for the trafficking. The conspiracy. Anywhere from 6 years to 15 years if you got the full kit and caboodle, right? Let's pretend there's no money laundering, no wire fraud, anything like that. Let's just pretend. So 6 years to 15 years. That's the sentencing range. Let's pretend. And you would get the full 15 if the judge is having a really bad day. You were convicted at trial. You showed no remorse. You did not accept any responsibility. So you're going to get, the judge sentences you to 15 years, right? Prior to the sentencing, though, if what the judge finds is that you didn't, let's say you didn't take it to trial, you did a plea agreement. Well, the sentencing guidelines might say that you could knock off 18 months for something like that. And let's say that that there was a cooperation clause in the plea agreement. That might be another 2 years knocked off. And let's say that you cooperated to such a degree that the federal authorities were able to take down this person, this organization, and you never lied to the authorities. You always were responsive to their phone calls. When they called you to go to somewhere, you were always ready to go somewhere on their stings and all this stuff. They're going to, the United States might say, we want to knock off, or we recommend knocking off another 4 years because the cooperation was so great. Or we even recommend no jail time whatsoever. That's the value of this cooperation, right? Or that's that's how you interest these people in cooperating, is you offer them that kind of value, because they weigh it against, if you cooperate, if you spend even one day in a federal in an FBOP, a Federal Bureau of Prison facility, you could get killed for being a snitch, right? Depending. And so there are all these ranges, right? So the federal government in this case, they were like, hey, look, we recommend, let me see, what was it? We recommend that Clarissa Adlawan receive this within the sentencing guideline range, right? And the judge, normally the judge agrees with whatever the federal government says is the sentencing guideline, but the judge was like, no. Chief Judge, according to Mark Robigo, Chief Judge Ramona V. Manglotnia imposed a stiffer sentence on Clarissa Adlawan than what was recommended, saying the case went beyond a simple fraud and into what she described as a befuddling and troubling dynamic in which a mother enabled and even encouraged her own daughter to participate in a conspiracy that siphoned funds meant for school children. Manglotnia sentenced Adlawan to 48 months in prison, slightly above the guideline range, while her daughter, Giselle Butalid, received 18 months, below the advisory range, after Manglotnia found her to be the more vulnerable participant in the scheme during their sentencing hearing last May 6 at the Guma Justicia in Susupi, as the U.S. District Court for the Northern Mariana Islands remains closed until further notice. Butalid previously worked under CNMI Public School System's Office of Curriculum and Instruction, where her duties included maintaining accurate records and data for federal grant projects and reporting this information to the grant director. So consider her role in this. Butalid was the government employee in this, the one with access to the government funds, okay? As a second major point raised during the hearing, IRS Special Agent Don Juan Schneider testified that Adlawan paid kickbacks to two officials connected to the Child Care and Development Fund, which documented amounts, et cetera, the testimony backed by bank records, et cetera, the restitution. Despite the prison terms, the court allowed both defendants to remain free for now, ordering them to self-surrender once the Federal Bureau of Prisons designates a facility. Manglotnia said she would recommend that both be housed together, noting their close personal and medical dependence. Adlawan, who addressed the court in tears, said she is a stage 3 cancer survivor with chronic health issues, while both she and Butalid told the court they rely on each other for their well-being. That, my friends, is savage. The only leniency the judge showed in this case was for these two to be housed together so that the daughter could, at least for her 18 months that she will be there for her mother who has stage 3, who is a stage 3 cancer survivor with chronic health issues. And even with that in mind, the judge was like, nope, not only am I not going to abide by the recommendation, but the government's recommendation to be within the sentencing guidelines, I'm going to go above it because you were the head of the conspiracy. This is the same federal judge who, come September of this year, actually, come July of this year, when pretrial motions become due, come July 8 of this year, will be taking over the Tenorio corruption case in Guam. Chief Judge Ramona Villagomez Manglotnia is the presiding judge of the Tenorio corruption case, in which the feds allege that Charissa Tenorio, who is the sister of the lieutenant governor, led a conspiracy that involved a wide range of government employees, including the lieutenant governor's boyfriend, in allegedly stealing $1.8 million, very similar to the $1.2 million in this case, from the federal government, parallel to this case, and poor people, very much parallel to this case in Saipan. And the allegation is that Charissa Tenorio was the one who led or manipulated or strong-armed, etc., other members of the conspiracy to participate in this conspiracy and to do jobs that included using their government roles to steal this money. The parallels are so similar here, and I wanted to raise this as we approach the July 8 due date of the pretrial motions, of the initial round of pretrial motions, so that we in the public better understand that this is the court that it is going into. Because I know some people are concerned about fairness and whatever. And first, let me just first say that the sort of concerns that people have about the Superior Court of Guam should not apply to the federal court, because the federal court is much more efficient, and the dispensing of justice in the federal court is much more swift, and the federal court has hardly ever really shown leniency, especially when something was proven at trial. Leniency has been shown according to sentencing guidelines in plea agreements and through cooperation and a whole bunch of different remorse and all these different factors, right? But when something is taken to trial, the federal court in Guam has been remiss to be lenient. I've seen some of Judge Manglonia from the federal court in the cinema. I've seen some of her decisions. I have never known her to be lenient, but this one, my friends, this one is the most savage that I've seen. And how closely this case resembles the Tenorio corruption case, I cannot tell you how much I am just looking forward to monitoring and reporting on this case. And you're going to have a report soon from Kandit, because on May 12, there is going to be the next hearing in the case. I have to apologize for not keeping the website version of our stories up to date. Like, I didn't do a website story for the last hearing. It was because I was tired, and Holy Week was coming up, and I was exhausted. Anyway, if any of you would like to do this job, if you would like to host an evening show and you feel that you constantly have something to say about the issues of our day or about human interest stories, please do contact me, because I am trying to unload these evening shows so that I can do more writing, so I can do other work for Kandit. Anyway, this is your Thursday news analysis. My name is Troy Torres, and I thank you very much for joining me this morning. Join me tonight for the Troy Torres Show, where we're going to talk about the Guam governor's vision for a new hospital and the things that are in the way and some concerns that the legislature has brought up. In the meantime, God bless you. Have a beautiful day. Thank you so much.